The Notre Dame Fighting Irish have a massive recruiting weekend ahead on June 6th. Who's going to commit? Who's trending for the Irish? And are they really going to end up with a top 5 recruiting class?
Locked On presents The Portal, the daily podcast covering college football recruiting and everything NIL. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome back into the Portal Podcast in this crossover edition with Locked On Irish. I am Brian Smith, your host. Thank you for making the Portal Podcast your first listen each and every day. Truly appreciate you stopping in. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets with a winning $5 bet. Today's show is all about the Fighting Irish. Marcus Freeman and his class is really good so far. They have a top 5 class by pretty much any measurement. But what is next? June 6th, June 13th, and June 20th are all loaded weekends in South Bend with official visitors from across the country. Are they going to get it done immediately? Is it going to be drawn out a little bit? We're going to discuss that. Who are the biggest names? Who are the biggest battles? All of that and more. And to help me figure it out, Locked On Irish insider, Tyler Wojcik. What's happening, Mr. Tyler?
Not much, man. Getting ready for a big couple months.
Yeah, I think Notre Dame will have a massive 60-day period, give or take, like the first couple of days of August. There'll be a few kids that'll drag it that long. But between now and the first couple of days of August, I think Notre Dame will be one of the best, if not the most prominent program at getting commitments and kind of finalizing. They're just kind of ahead. About the only school that's further ahead than Notre Dame, ironically, is the rival USC, who I don't think there's going to be much news about them. They don't have a whole lot of kids that they're after that aren't committed. So they're kind of out of that picture. But Clemson, Notre Dame, Florida, there's several schools that are trending for kids, and they're all battling each other. So first thing that I want to say beyond the commitments, I'm not going to name names, a whole bunch of kids. There's a few that I kind of like, but we'll talk about Joey OBrien. We'll discuss some of the kids that are like Drake Quinn. They're battling Clemson and Georgia and several players, or several big-time players in the recruiting game. But the most important thing here to note is Notre Dame has been extremely organized, going after the guys they wanted and got in on them early. You don't get to this point and have success without all those things happening, because Notre Dame's recruiting kids from areas they don't normally get players. North Carolina, Texas, they'll get a guy here or there, but like they might get 5 or more players out of the Lone Star State this year. I don't remember the last time that happened, and my guess is when Bob Davie was on staff and he coached at A&M for a long time. So that's a little different. Now they're really trending there. North Carolina is a state they've dabbled in. They're doing pretty good. Florida and Georgia, they have absolutely hit a home run, and I think a lot of it has to do with the playoff run. So congrats to them for that. But it starts with June 6th. I just kind of want to mention at least a few of the kids that they're going to have coming in for official visits that weekend. And Tyler, I'm going to bounce a few ideas off of you, some thoughts about some of the kids they have coming in, because I'm curious what you think the best opportunity is for a commitment for Notre Dame from this upcoming weekend. And if there's anybody that you're just quote unquote really not sure what's going to happen, or if it's just going to go all out. But if I had to pick one guy to commit, it would be Nick Reddish. He's the kid that's out of Independence in Charlotte, North Carolina. There's that state again. He's a safety that Notre Dame has done very, very well with. I don't know if there's a number 2 for him, but I know Notre Dame's doing very well. They got a bunch of receivers coming in. I'm fascinated personally with Kohen Brown out of Waxahachie. He could fly. They also have several commitments coming in. They got Brayden Robinson, who might be a commitment by the end of this weekend or early next. Miami, Notre Dame, we'll see. They're doing a lot of things in Texas, so that's not really shocking. They also have a few battles, like, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing this right, Grayson McKeogh, the big offensive tackle out of LaSalle College in Philly. Of course, he's teammates with a very good safety we're going to talk about here in a little bit. And then you got kids like Khary Wilder. Notre Dame doesn't lead, and he's a kid from California, in your neck of the woods. He plays at Sarah, just outside of Los Angeles. They would love to get him, but they got some ground to make up. So there's a variety. But is there anybody, in your opinion, that they think they can get, or you think they're going to get this weekend that maybe somebody else doesn't, or you think it's just going to be kind of status quo?
Reddish would be the safest bet to commit this weekend. Now, you also have the defensive tackle, Alister Vallejo, who's supposed to commit on June 10th. And his recruitment has just been fascinating to watch when you consider the fact that he was a very under the radar prospect just a few months ago. Then his recruitment blew up, and now he's down to a final three that includes Notre Dame and Michigan, which is pretty common for a prospect, and then Kansas, who's right there at number 3. And I think Kansas is a legitimate player in this recruitment, despite what some people might think. And it sounds like, depending on who you ask, you might get 3 different answers as to who is leading for his recruitment. He is going to announce his commitment on June 10th, so that's another one to keep an eye on. I have no idea where he leans because, like I said, you hear different things from different people. But Nick Reddish is a guy who Notre Dame has been after for a while, and he's somewhat of an afterthought in the fan base because all the fans want Joey O'Brien for good reason. He's a 5-star, top 50 player in the entire country and is just a special safety prospect. But because of the attention put on O'Brien, I think some fans have neglected to really look into Reddish. I think he's a good player. He might not have the profile of a Joey O'Brien, but if Notre Dame gets him this weekend, that's a good start and maybe the first domino to fall in what could be a very impactful and eventful couple months here.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Joey O'Brien's the big fish that a lot of people are talking about. But I think it's safe to say when Notre Dame recruits a defensive back, you should trust the staff at this point. And Nick Reddish has got plenty of offers himself, and he plays in Charlotte at a very good program. So he is certainly one of them. The guy that I might be the most curious about, and I'll talk about what I've heard anyway from a Penn State side of things, Khary Adams, the kid out of Loyola at Blakefield in Towson, Maryland, which is basically Baltimore. I've heard the parents want Penn State. He's going to visit Notre Dame this weekend. That's a kid that would be huge. If they could get him on campus and get the parents on their side, in my opinion, he's conservatively a top 5 corner in the United States. And obviously Notre Dame's rolling at that position, so it's not hard to sell. But Penn State just hired the Ohio State defensive coordinator, who might be the best in the country. And they've got really good defensive back history here lately as well. That's a great matchup. And again, he's McKeogh's teammate. You got Kaydon Finley that's going to be on campus. They've got some other committed kids trying to help, like Javion Osborne, a kid from Forney, Texas, just outside of Dallas. So Finley probably knows him. He's from Aledo, just outside of Dallas. There's all these little tentacles where players connect in one way, shape, or form by who they're being recruited by, where they're from. It's really, really interesting.
I agree. And Khary Adams is someone who would be a true game changer in that secondary, because you think about all the great cornerbacks and defensive backs as a whole that have come through Notre Dame in recent years. Well, they had Benjamin Morrison, who came in, started as a true freshman. Last year, Leonard Moore replaced Benjamin Morrison after he went down with an injury and ended up becoming a freshman All-American. Khary Adams would be a much higher rated commitment than either one of these prospects. I think he is just a freak athletically. So the fact that Notre Dame is going to battle with Penn State for their 2 top defensive back targets is really interesting to me, because I think depending on who you ask, Penn State appears to be in the lead for both. With O'Brien, it makes sense because he's from Pennsylvania, and even Khary Adams, he's from the DMV area, which is closer to Pennsylvania than South Bend. But don't you find it funny that in this recruitment with Adams, the parents are actually the ones that Notre Dame needs to convince? Because usually Notre Dame wins the parents' battle. They convince the parents that Notre Dame is the best fit because of the academic reasons, the life after football, and all that stuff. But now they're in a weird position where they have to get the parents on their side. I just think it's a funny turn of events.
I'm guessing that distance from home is the primary there. But they may not know as much about Notre Dame because he probably lives 3 hours from Penn State. It's much further to South Bend. So that's why this visit's probably more important for him to Notre Dame. Like any kid from one of the coasts to the Irish, they're not going to know as much about South Bend and what Notre Dame has to offer. And it's a unique school, as you obviously know well as an alum. So when we come back, I'm going to talk a little bit about Joey O'Brien, some things that I've heard, and why this could be a rather unique recruitment, because there's somebody trending that's not normally talked about with him. That is next here on this crossover of Locked On Irish and Locked On the Portal. The NBA playoffs are in full swing, and we are actually even to the NBA Finals. It's kind of hard to believe, but it is June now. Got the Pacers going up against OKC, the Thunder. That is going to be a great series, and there's going to be a lot of highlights. There's going to be some major momentum shifts and can't miss moments in what I think is going to be a 6 or possibly even a 7-game series. Whether it's a game-winning shot, breakout player, there's never been a better time to get into the action, and FanDuel makes it easier to stay in the game before tip-off and live. Player props, performance trends, and same-game parlays. Fans have more ways than ever to play smart and to win big. The key for me, Mr. Halliburton for the Pacers. He had a triple-double against the Knicks in one game, 32, 15, and 12, if I remember correctly. That's incredible for a guard to do. What he does probably dictates who wins that series. So the player props for him should be really interesting. And if you're new to FanDuel, it's the perfect time to sign up. Head over to FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet. If it wins, $200 in bonus bets are yours. Make every moment more with FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right. Thank you once again for making the Portal Podcast and Locked On Irish your first listens each and every day. We truly appreciate you stopping in. I am Brian Smith. This is Tyler Wojcik. Appreciate you once again. I just want to make a basic statement about recruiting. Anything is possible. And a great example of that is somebody you had just mentioned, Tyler. That is Joey O'Brien. He plays at LaSalle College. It's outside of Philly. It's a good program. They've got a lot of talent coming through there. And he's a kid that's been scouted for a long time. And many people have went after him. Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State, Notre Dame, etc. But Clemson is a school that is trending. And I'm just going to make a basic statement here that I've made many times on the Portal Podcast. No team in the country does a better job on game day visits, out-of-season visits, anytime at camp, anything, than Clemson. I don't know what it is they do. I've never visited that school, but they have a higher hit rate of commitments based on a visit than any school in the country. If he ends up at Clemson, do not be surprised. They are trending with him. And to be honest, Joey O'Brien, if he didn't sign with Penn State or Notre Dame, wouldn't shock me at all. I told people right before this got started, Clemson was really putting in the effort on recruiting. So just keep them in mind. Have you heard anything different than that?
No, I agree. And I think the fact that he announced a commitment date coming off a visit to Clemson is pretty telling. Usually that's a pretty strong indicator of where a prospect is going to commit. Now, the difference is with O'Brien, he is still going to take his other scheduled visits. I remember when Rodney Dunham took a visit to Notre Dame, he immediately announced his commitment date and canceled the other official visits. So you kind of had an idea where that recruitment was going to go. So we're going to see what happens with O'Brien. I think that the interesting thing about this recruitment is that, like you said, Clemson is known for just nailing the visits. Notre Dame is also very good at that as well. And then with Penn State, he's been to that campus a million times because it's not far from home. And Penn State has done a great job keeping the top players in Penn State, of which there are plenty. Pennsylvania is a big football school, or football state, I should say. They've been really good at keeping their players at Penn State, and it's going to come down to the wire. I could see this going any of the three ways. And then you've got Oregon in there as well. I don't know how much of a player they are in this recruitment, but I'm with you. I could see him going to Penn State, Notre Dame, or Clemson.
The other interesting part with Joey O'Brien is he recently went to Oregon, and they were trending for a while. And one of my friends said, "Oh, watch out for Oregon." I said, "Easy." He said, "It's too early." And he goes, "What do you mean?" I said, "Just trust me." Then he visited a few other schools, and they kind of trend like whoever he visits last also has an impression. I think the way it's set now, doesn't Notre Dame get the last visit?
They do.
3rd? Okay, so maybe
and they moved that up.
Yeah, he moved that up. He got rid of Tennessee or somebody. I forget who it is, but he canceled somebody. Notre Dame's the 13th now for Joey O'Brien, so we'll see on him. As far as DB recruiting, by the way, Notre Dame, it's so funny. For years, they were so bad at DB recruiting, and now it's just off the charts. Like they didn't have anybody on the roster that's going to play in the NFL, safety or corner. Now they'll have like 3 or 4 at each spot. It's just completely flipped. And that's one of the reasons the program's so much better. So congrats to them from development, strength and conditioning, and evaluation, everything. They've done a great job. Is there anybody from this weekend coming up or the one after, the June 13th, that you think Notre Dame fans should be like, okay, you're probably not talking about – we talked about Nick Reddish. That was a good one. Is there anybody else you're like, this kid not only might commit, but this is a pretty darn good player and it's somebody you're intrigued by?
Well, Kohen Brown is one player, the wide receiver prospect. He was committed to USC, then he decommitted, and he's good friends with Javian Osborne. And I think his recruitment is even more important now that Texas seems to be trending with Kaydon Finley. Notre Dame appeared to be in the lead with Finley for a really long time. Finley has been Notre Dame's top target at the wide receiver position for months, and Notre Dame does not have a good track record in recent years of landing their top target at the position. I don't even want to talk about the Derek Meadows saga ever again because that was such a roller coaster ride last year ended up committing to LSU before flipping to Alabama. But now with Finley, Texas is really going all out with him. And Finley is a Texas legacy. His dad played football for the Longhorns, and it does feel like they have kind of taken over the lead. And if that were the case, if Finley ends up going to Texas, Notre Dame is going to have some strong backup options because they have recruited that position so poorly in recent years. And I think that they have the best shot of landing Kohen Brown. And once he first decommitted to USC, it was a popular name that was being thrown around. He's a speedster. But I think that recruitment is all that more important now than it was before because of how things are trending with Finley.
The other kid's kind of interesting is Jaden Warren. He's a sub 10.2 kid. And I said that correctly. Sub 10.2 in the 100 meters, which is insane. And he's an elite academic kid who wants to go into the medical field. Like, he was born to play at a school like a Stanford, a Vandy, and Notre Dame.
It makes you wonder why they didn't offer until late April. I've been kind of confused by all that.
Yeah, I don't know what the deal is. He lives just south of Houston, so it's not like he's hard to get to. But anyway, that's another kid. And then there's Brayden Robinson. He's a swap, but he is dynamic. I saw him when he was coming out of 8th grade, and everybody knew then. Like, he was playing with juniors and seniors and just as faster than everybody in the field before he'd taken a single class as a freshman. It was insane. So it sounds like Notre Dame or Miami for him, but we'll see. Ian Premer, the incredibly talented tight end from the state of Kansas, he's going to be on campus coming up on the 17th. That's another kid that's a really important visit. And I'm not going to jump into the June 20th. There's too many kids between now and then, and there'll be some moving around. But just looking at the list, like, there's not a single kid that I'm looking at that I'm like, okay, I don't know if this kid can play at the Notre Dame level. Every one of them that I'm looking at can. It's really, really awesome. So I'm curious if there's anybody they bring in that isn't like blown away. Like Devin Fitzgerald is talking about receivers. That's, of course, his dad is a certain famous Hall of Fame receiver. That kid would be talked about in Notre Dame circles in other years. Like, we got to get this kid. He's probably not one of the top 5 receivers on the board, and he's got a bunch of offers. So it's really, really wild. Is there anybody else that you want to talk about from the visit list? You want to talk big picture?
Well, I think with this upcoming weekend, with Irish Invasion being on campus and the way that they have stacked these 2 weekends is pretty interesting to me, because this weekend is mostly about the class of 2027. It's a great opportunity for on-campus evaluations for the coaching staff, and that is something that you and I have talked about before. Marcus Freeman and his staff really value in-person evaluations, and that's a big reason why they have not even offered a quarterback in the class of 2027 yet. We could debate the strategy there, but it's something where Gino Guidugli really likes to see the players in front of him first, and he's going to have a great opportunity to do that this weekend, because I think they have like over 20 quarterbacks who are going to be on campus. But the way that they have stacked it, with this weekend being Irish Invasion, and then you have all of the 2027 guys, and also some commits in this class as well. And then the following weekend, June 13th, just a couple of their key names. There's a bunch of commits coming in, like quarterback Noah Grubbs, but then some of the names that we were talking about: Kaydon Finley, Devin Fitzgerald, Kohen Brown, Gregory Patrick, Khary Adams, Reddish, Jonas Walton. Like, I could go on and on and on, but clearly this is intentional. They want to get their current commits with their top targets on campus at the same time, and that is coming up on June 13th. And they're already starting to do that in a way with the class of 2027, trying to get all of those guys on campus at the same time. You cover recruiting nationally. Do you see this strategy implemented often by the other schools? Maybe this is common practice, but I do think it's interesting how they are stacking these weekends and trying to get everyone on campus at the same time.
They're doing a really good job of doing that, and they've kind of built towards this, but 2 things. One, because of the shortened window with the NCAA clearing the last week of June, and July is a dead period as well. They're both dead. The camps aren't as important now, because some schools, they might have one, but there's just not enough time because you're worried about the seniors. Notre Dame is so far ahead, though, point 2, with the recruiting for the class of 26, they could split it up a little bit. If you're a school that's sitting at 5 commitments right now, Notre Dame's got an advantage because they've recruited so well with the underclassmen ranked, like they do all the offers on St. Patty's Day. That kind of stuff adds up. It's a long grind, but they pay off at the end because you've got a bunch of kids committed. I think that's important. And your point about bringing them all together, get a handful of guys commit early, and then they start working on the other guys in their class, top kids from around the country, from Arizona to New Jersey. Notre Dame's recruiting somebody, and they get them on campus. You have a better chance for them to bond and then to get commitments. Clemson obviously does a really good job with that. Florida's done a pretty good job. Michigan, Texas has done a tremendous job getting some select kids, especially quarterbacks. Sark has done a great job with that. But there aren't many schools that are really good at it. And right now, Notre Dame's one of the best. So they deserve some kudos for that, for sure.
Right. And I think there's two ways of looking at it. On one hand, you could basically look at it as, well, when you bring all these guys on campus at once and you bring in the committed prospects and the top targets, they get to mingle, they get to be part of the class. And I think the camaraderie is really helpful. And I think it provides an opportunity for the other top guys in the class to recruit some of the guys who aren't committed. And then the counter to that would be, if you were to basically question this strategy, would be, well, if you bring in so many guys at once, then you don't get the individual time with some of the top uncommitted prospects with the coaching staff, because there are just too many people, because it's not just the kids, it's the families. They're all making the trip to South Bend. So I think that is why it's so interesting to me, because clearly the staff thinks that just getting them around other prospects is actually way more beneficial than having one-on-one time. Whereas if a player comes in during the middle of the week, say they're one of 5 visitors total, then they get a lot more attention from the coaching staff, but they're not as part of the greater community. And I just think it's a really interesting strategy. It's one that Notre Dame has deployed for years now under Marcus Freeman. But with these next 2 upcoming weekends, I think it is more extreme than ever before, with all the people who are going to be in town for Irish Invasion. And then June 13th, that weekend, I mean, it's dozens and dozens of top targets.
Yeah. I was looking at it, like, I was thinking they had a bunch of kids on June 6th. Like, they're focusing on some of the underclassmen stuff this week, getting it started. They've got a great plan. They really do. And they've got so many kids committed in the 26 class visiting with the other kids that are uncommitted. It's the same principle, but with a class ahead. They want their commitments around guys that they really want. And the kids they know they're going to get, or at least they think, they bring them in for the underclassmen to put them around the kids they probably have a longer way to go. This is not by accident. I agree. It's the herd mentality, and it's working for Notre Dame, so you can't really argue with it, because right now, if they finish where I think they will, and I'll talk about this more in just a second, this will be the best class they've had in over a decade. So, and it's going to be one of the more balanced ones. Matter of fact, when we come back, we'll get into that next here on this crossover of Locked on Irish and Locked on the Portal. All right, Tyler, if you had to pick right now, does Notre Dame finish with a top 5 recruiting class?
I think they will. I think they're going to be 5th. It's going to be coming down to the wire. There's going to be points where it feels like they're probably safe. They're going to definitely get a top 5 class. But then come early signing day in early December, I think they're just going to make the cut. And that's a great thing, because Notre Dame has been in pole position before. I feel like at one point in each of the past 2, maybe even 3 cycles, they've had the number 1 class in the country, but they were front loaded, where they had so many guys committed early. I remember this time last year where Notre Dame already had over 20 commitments in the class, and these recruiting weekends weren't as exciting because there was like a couple guys that they were still going after. But for the most part, the class was already kind of said and done. Whereas now they have 16 commitments, but they're still after some top targets, which for someone who has to talk about it all the time, I think is a little bit more exciting, because it's a conversation of, well, they could land this guy, as opposed to they're just trying to hold on for dear life. And there was a couple of guys like Deuce Knight where they weren't able to hold on. So this is a lot more entertaining, I would say. And I do think that it's going to come down to the wire. There's going to be a lot of guys who are planning on committing before the start of the season. Like we've already talked about, Joey OBrien, he's supposed to commit on June 20th. Alister Vallejo, June 10th. Kaydon Finley is not given a specific timetable, but it sounds like he wants to commit before the season. Same with defensive tackle Elijah Golden, which I think plays in Notre Dame's favor here, because they don't really like to go down to the wire with these recruitments. They like to kind of have it said and done beforehand. So I think it's going to be really entertaining these next couple of months. I think they're probably going to be at 1 or 2 at the start of the actual football season. Then the Georgias and the Alabamas, they're going to get their guys a little bit later, but I think they're ultimately going to hold on and get that 5th spot.
Yeah, I would say that the easy money, like Georgia will finish somewhere in the top 5. Ohio State probably will. Bama maybe. SC, and then maybe Notre Dame. LSU and a couple other schools could battle, but the spots like 4 through 7 will be about as close as it gets, and Notre Dame will be in that mix. They could even be higher. And that brings me to a final point on my end. One of the things that I'm looking at more from talking to other recruiting analysts, Andrew Ivins at 24/7, John Garcia Jr. at Rivals, etc., a trend that we're all seeing, NFL and college, taking low maintenance recruits. And what do I mean by that? Kids that off the field aren't going to be a problem, and that includes their parents, their handlers, their 7-on-7 coaches. Notre Dame, because they've been doing that for a while compared to what other schools are doing, their retention rate for top talent is probably as good or better than any school in the country. I would say Penn State or Notre Dame is probably the best at doing that. There's a handful of others that are pretty close. Ohio State would be another one that's pretty high. What do they all have in common? Those three schools, among others, were in the playoffs, and those were 3 of the Final 4 last year. That is something when I do my final rankings in December, will play into this, because your history of bringing in the right guys instead of just taking mercenaries is really important. Notre Dame won't take those kids. Even if they're super talented, they'll bypass them. And it's smart. There are some kids that I know that were ranked super high in this last class that pick schools based on NIL. I will bet you money that they do not end up at that school or producing after they cleared that check. That's an interesting trend. But anything else you'd like to add tonight, Tom?
I was just thinking about this now that you said that. There really is no Deuce Knight. There's no Peyton Bowen in this class, at least right now, because at this point last year, there were already all kinds of rumors and stuff about what's Deuce Knight actually going to do. I think this is actually where it really ramped up with Auburn, where he went to their Big Cat weekend, and you started to realize Notre Dame might have his commitment, but they aren't in the lead anymore, which is a kind of funny way to look at it. And 2 years ago, it was Peyton Bowen, and it seems like in this class, at least as we sit here today in early June, there's really not a person in this class who seems to be entertaining offers. Now, don't get me wrong, there is probably going to be a decommitment at some point, which happens. But in terms of the dramatic, very public decommitments where they're committed, but it's so out in the open that they aren't actually committed to that school, up to this point, we have not seen that in this class with Notre Dame. And I don't think that's a coincidence. I think that the coaching staff realized their own mistakes in recent seasons where they were trying to hang on with Deuce Knight, even though that effort was probably, they knew it was going to be wasted effort. And then the year before with Peyton Bowen, I mean, he did nothing to convince anyone that he was committed to Notre Dame. I mean, he was wearing Oregon gear during football games and Oklahoma gear, is going to Texas A&M every other weekend. There hasn't been a prospect who's done anything like that in this class up to this point, and I think that shows a lesson learned from Marcus Freeman and the coaching staff.
I would agree. Again, the new trend is low maintenance, and you will see it in my recruiting rankings. I'll have a lot of people screaming at me, calling me names that I can't repeat on this podcast, because it's not about the talent. It's who you sign and keep that really matter in recruiting. Tyler, tell everybody where they can find your work.
Locked On Irish every weekday, talking a lot of recruiting this month, obviously, too. But we're getting closer to the start of the season, planning on doing some opponent previews, looking at who Notre Dame is going to face on the schedule, hoping to do some crossover episodes with other Locked On hosts. So tune into that, subscribe, all that good stuff.
Absolutely. You can find the Portal Podcast on Spotify, Apple, YouTube, and anywhere you get your pods. Like and subscribe, and please share this podcast. We will see you again soon. This has been a crossover with Locked On the Portal and Locked On Irish.